On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas wins at Cincinnati, how a lot of people like to make their sandwiches more mayo.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter, at Derek Johnson on Blue Sky. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. On today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks, we break down the recap of Kansas 54, Cincinnati 40. Jayhawks winning back-to-back games on the road. What is this? We're going to get into how it happened. The second half defense, elite once again for KU. We'll get into all that. Shakeel Moore, Zeke, Mayo, more Mayo all day long for KU. And we're going to break down what this win means. We'll get to our game awards and what is next for KU with a pretty big one in Ames, Iowa early next week. Before we get into any of that, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, where you could have got Kansas. I think it was like +1 last night, and then today it dropped to Kansas -1. Either way, you would have been good to go. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Kansas 54, Cincinnati 40. Jayhawks again do it with second half defense. Also, like I said, back-to-back road wins. How about that for the Jayhawks? If they win in Ames, we're going to feel like the road woes are no more. And who knows, maybe this is the start of that being the case regardless, because winning in Ames against a really good Iowa State team, maybe that shouldn't be the judgment. Anyway, nonetheless, Kansas finishes this game on a 16-3 run over the final 7 minutes or so of the game. The more impressive part of that, to me, isn't the fact that it was a 16-3 run. It's that Kansas held Cincinnati to just 3 points over the final 6 minutes and 47 seconds of the game. Cincinnati was just 1 for 11 to finish the game from the floor. And overall, Cincinnati finishes with just 15 points in the second half. This is after a game in which you defeated Arizona State by holding them to 13 second half points. So actually the second half defense worse this game than the game before. Is there a problem in Lawrence with their second half defense? But no, in all honesty, like, that is remarkable. Kansas has given up 28 total second half points in 2 games combined. Like, giving up 28 second half points would be good for one game. They've done it in 2 games combined, 2 Big 12 games combined. In the case of Arizona State, maybe a bubble team. In the case of Cincinnati, at this point, kind of a bubble team, I guess, because they're 0-4 in Big 12 play. I don't know. Whatever. Regardless, I mean, it is unbelievable what the second half defense has been, enough to a point where it's like, is this their identity at this point? Is their identity being a second half defense? Is their identity being just a defensive team in general? You look at it now on KenPom, Kansas is the 4th ranked defense nationally. And as much time as we've talked about, their struggles defensively against teams who can space you out and hit a bunch of threes, or teams who want to pick and roll you to death, have they figured that stuff out, right? I do think in the case of, like, you look at Cincinnati and UCF and Arizona State, I don't know how much the way that they want to play stylistically, like in terms of their personnel, is going to challenge KU as much as, some other teams in terms of what their weaknesses are on the defensive end of the court. So I do think that helps a little bit here. But, like, at the same point in time, maybe they have figured some stuff out since the West Virginia game. Maybe that film was enough for them to really, flip a switch and figure out what they needed to do on the defensive end of the court. Whether it's Bill Self scheming something up, whether it's the players figuring things out and how they want to defend. It feels like they're going in the right way on the defensive end of the court in a very real way. And we are seeing that being the difference in not just Kansas winning, these, obviously the UCF win, you could have given up 20 extra points in the final second half of that game. You still would have won by 30. But these last 2 games, in that whole second half defense isn't just leading you to win the game. It's leading you to win the game by double figures, leading you to win the game in blowout fashion. So I am wondering if this is becoming kind of their identity of being a defensive team in a way that, you think about it. Okay, well, you have Dwan Harris, former Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. You have KJ Adams, who I view as a plus defender. You have Flory Badunga coming off the bench. And, this wasn't Flory's best game, but he's still a good defender overall. I say it all the time, like as much as we talk about Hunter Dickinson not being a good defender in space or in pick and roll, if you just have him in the lane or you have him as a one-on-one defender or from a defensive rebounding perspective, he is a good defender from those perspectives because he is just giant and he gobbles up a lot of defensive rebounders or defensive rebounds. And so you add Shaq Moore to the starting lineup, who is also a plus defender. Now you have a lineup out there when it is Shakeel Moore, DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams. That's 3+ defenders out there, right? And then if you have Flory out there at a given time, like there's a reason that it's the case. But I think also from this game, it makes you feel good that this is a back-to-back good game. I guess 3 straight good games, right? Since Shakeel Moore's entered the starting lineup, he finishes with 8 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. In the end, when you look at plus minus for Kansas, really all the starters graded out really well. The bench did not. This was not a really good game for the bench overall. But Shakeel Moore finished a plus 16. That was second on the team. KJ Adams led the team with a plus 17, which this was kind of a perfect game to have KJ Adams. And it's not even that KJ was, a great shooting, but like it's just a physical, rugged game back and forth where their 4-man isn't really much of a shooter either. And Dylan Mitchell, like this was a great game to have KJ Adams. And Shakeel Moore fits in so perfectly because if we're talking about the identity of this team becoming a defensive team, Shakeel Moore is a really good defensive guard. And then you add to it the athleticism he brings, that dunk that he throws down, just having somebody else who can create his shot for him. Even if he's only going to score 6, 8, 10 points in a game, just having another guy who has that ability to handle the ball, take the load off DeJuan Harris, take some minutes off his play good defense, and create his own shot here or there, it's so pivotal, man. And it's funny, in a game where Shakeel Moore and Zeke Mayo combined for just 17 points combined, where they combined 8 of 19 from the floor, where they combined 1 of 8 from 3-point range. And again, you have to grade everything on a curve because it's like, well, when I say 17 points of 54, that's like a third of your output, right? But those numbers don't jump off the page. But they made key plays when it mattered. Like they were the players who were making the winning plays at the end of the game. And the biggest thing in this, like Kansas showed some stones in winning this game. And when I think of the best seasons that Bill Self has at Kansas, or maybe not even that's the best way to put it, the good seasons that Bill Self has at Kansas, I guess they're all good seasons if you view them. Oh, they've all been top 4 seeds. Everybody would take that, right? So whatever. The better seasons for Bill Self at Kansas, they all involve being able to win games ugly and specifically go on the road and win ugly games. And this is something that eluded Kansas really last season. They weren't really able to go on the road and ugly up a game and win it. Obviously, if you keep doing this and keep having to ugly up wins, at some point it gets a little bit, okay, are you just ugly too? But that hasn't been the case for KU, right? You have to be able to, every now and then, you're not going to play your best game. You're not going to hit shots, right? You have to be able to make other teams worse and play worse. And that's something Bill Self talks about all the time. Kansas made the other team play worse today. Kansas made the other team play worse in the second half against Arizona State. They didn't do it in the first half, but they did do it definitively in the second half. And they did it all game long against Cincinnati. They made them play worse. And so when you look at the best Bill Self seasons, this is the Bill Self special. They win a couple of the games like this. And so the fact that you are now starting to show that you can win games like that, I think is a huge step forward in how I evaluate this team, because I almost view it as like, okay, Bill Self is starting to shape them. They're starting to fall in line, so to speak, with what Bill Self wants them to do. That is how I view a win like this, which makes it so important. And when you look at those, like, it's not just you grinded out a gross, ugly looking game to find a way to win on the road. It's also that you combined making a team play worse with maybe a key player stepping up. Like, you think of all the times that Devontae Graham or Frank Mason or one of these players stepped up and made big plays at the end of the game. That was the KU guards in this game. DeJuan Harris didn't have a good offensive game, but he hits that good floater to make it a double-digit lead. Shakeel Moore and Zeke Mayo at the end of the game, right? They found a way to make it happen. Of course, Hunter Dickinson had 14 points too, just giving you your steady 14 that I haven't even talked about to this point in time. It's just it feels like those were the winning things that led to this one with Shakeel Moore and Zeke Mayo kind of being awesome late for KU. Okay, let's get to our game trophies and what is next for KU on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode of the show is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, whether you've got one form or 20 forms. TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax live full-service real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Continuing on with our game awards, and don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball, Locked On College Football your second listen every day. You can get recaps from the college football playoff games that just were over this past week, or the large amount of basketball games that have been occurring with Locked On College Basketball over this weekend. Okay, let's get to our game trophies here. We're going to start with our best moment of the game. I think there's an obvious one here, but I do want to throw another one out there for honorable mention, and that would be the KJ Adams and one. He didn't make the free throw, so can I still call it an and one? Either way, there was you had like I forget if it was a steal or what, but you end up with Shakeel Moore taking a layup in transition, and it's no good. And KJ Adams hustles down the floor, grabs the rebound on a tip in the air, and while all in one effort, jumping, grabbing the rebound, tipping it in, laying it in off the window, he's fouled as well, gets super pumped. It goes into like a media timeout, and he ends up, like I said, missing the free throw, but it was still such a big energetic play. It put Kansas up 38-35 at the time, which sounds like it should be a score in the first half. It was late in the game, but the reason it's only honorable mention, I mean, I guess I could also honorable mention the DeJuan shot, but it's a very clear answer, I think, for best moment in this one as well. In the same way that the best moments of the Arizona State game were like the Shakeel Moore steals that led to the Shakeel Moore dunk and then the Rylan Griffin dunk. In this game, it was the Zeke Mayo steal that then he gets down the court, lobs the pass to Shakeel Moore for an alley-oop from a little guard that puts you up 46-37 with like 3:45-ish left. And then obviously Kansas never turns back from there. That kind of felt like the nail in the coffin, even though usually like the nail in the coffin has to come with like under 2 minutes, maybe under a minute to go. Cause like there's still 3:45 left. Like they could come back from down 9. It happens all the time. But the way that there was no offense really in this game overall for both teams and the importance of that one, it kind of just felt like, okay, Kansas winning this game because of that. And even then, like they were in at least a comfortable position, 44-37, but that like, was kind of that nail in the coffin. And then you add to it just the excitement of going a guard to guard alley-oop. And, we talked about this in the Arizona State game. Shakeel Moore, the best little man dunker of the Bill Self era at Kansas. Okay, worst moment of the game. I mean, honestly, like we could just say offense in general. That from a neutral perspective, if you had no rooting interest for either team, Kansas or Cincinnati, if you watched this game, good on you. You probably came away from this game. Like if this was the first college basketball game you had ever seen, you would never watch college basketball again, right? Like this is the type of game that, no, you know what? I'm not going to go there. No, I already talked about it. Too late. All right. You want to know? This is the type of game where like the NBA people who, and I like NBA. So like, this is not me, I'm one of those people who likes both NBA and college, but there are certain NBA people who are like, oh, college basketball, they suck. They can't make any shots. They can't do any offense, right? Those people would have a field day with this game. Okay, worst moment of the game, though, if I'm picking an actual moment, honestly, I think it was so Arrington Page, the big man for Cincinnati, which great name. I love the name Arrington. I don't know where you got that name from, but I love that. So he was the big man for Cincinnati. He had a pretty good game, 9.7 rebounds in just 14 minutes of play. So when you consider the minutes played, like that's really impressive. He came into this one, I think 2 of 4 from 3-point range. So like clearly he showed he can make a three, but like it's not part of his like he's only shooting one every like 3 games. So you don't expect him to make a step back three as the shot clock is winding down that puts them up 31-30. And that's one of those moments where it's like, oh no, now they're winning late on a ridiculous step back three by their backup center. Like, is this gonna, and then it's immediately followed by AJ Storr kind of forcing up a mid-range and airballing it. And that was for sure, I think to me, the worst moment of the game. Okay, we have a new game award for this one. And honestly, I kind of want to do this for games moving forward, but we'll see how it goes. We are going to do the most appalling stat of the game. There were a lot of appalling stats in this one. Like, I think appalling stats can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? I think from a bad perspective would be the majority of these. In fact, it's unless you're viewing it from a standpoint of just defense, then it would all be bad. Kansas was only 6 of 15 on layups. That is appalling. Together, the two teams, 12 of 30 on layups. That's 40% on layups. That is an appalling stat. Kansas, 35% from the floor. Cincinnati, 31%. That's an appalling stat. Free throw shooting. The fact that there were only 7 combined free throw attempts. Kansas was 4 for 5. Cincinnati was 1 for 2. The fact that there were only 7 combined free throw attempts in a game where clearly both defenses were playing very physical and very hard. Like, I don't think this was an advantage for one way or another because both ended up around the same amount. But, like, that is appalling that there weren't more free throw attempts for either team. That is just unbelievable to see that happen. I think it's probably also appalling, and this is the official pick for me, the three-point shooting, right? You could make the argument either way, like, oh no, Kansas only went 2 of 21 from 3. Is that indicative that they're not a good three-point shooting team, right? I view this from the other lens. I'm like, oh, they won a game by 14 on the road that they were only 2 of 21 from 3. That's awesome. And now you hope that against Iowa State, you have a reversion to the mean and you hit, 50% from 3, right? So I think that's awesome. But from a game watching perspective, the two teams combined, 5 of 43 from 3-point range. No, that is not good. Cincinnati shot 14% from 3. Kansas shot 10% from 3. So that is the most appalling stat of the game, is that both teams were so bad from 3-point range. Okay, our rim clanker of the game. This could go in line with that because there's a lot to choose from, a lot of missed shots, a lot of missed threes. But I think actually for me, it's Dylan Mitchell, who I thought he actually had like a game, 10 points, 5 rebounds. He tried to go for a dunk late in the second half. And Hunter Dickinson, like, it's not that he was like trying to block the shot. It was actually kind of a crafty play there by Hunter where he like kind of stepped in to be like, I'm going to go for the block, but he didn't actually. And Dylan Mitchell was just far enough away from the rim that it at least impacted him enough that he got rim stuffed on the dunk attempt to Dylan Mitchell. And I don't know if he cracked the rim because I feel like at that point in time, I'm trying to remember exactly where they were at. They might have only had one more basket the rest of the way after that rim stuff dunk. So that would be the rim clanker of the game in a game that was full of rim clankers. Okay, offensive MVP for KU. I think you have to go with Hunter Dickinson. He was the only double-digit scorer. He had 14 points, 7 of 16 from the floor, 4 offensive rebounds. He got a bunch on the offensive glass for you, which shout out to KJ, by the way, because the thing that makes KJ a lot more, I think playable if you're playing the two big lineup, which obviously they do, is if he's rebounding basketball. These are 3 straight games where he's had good rebounding games. He had 7 this game, 5 on the offensive glass. If KJ keeps doing that on the glass, I don't know, like complaints withdrawn from people, there's still going to be complaints, but like less complaints with Bill Self about how many minutes he plays, I think, if he's rebounding like that. But yeah, Hunter Dickinson, 14 points. He was 0 for 3 from 3, but 7 of 13 on 2-point shots. He also had 2 assists and 0 turnovers, which against a team who can really swarm you, I think that's certainly impressive. But also, like, shout out to Zeke, Mayo, and Shakeel Moore at the end for the offense there. But yeah, Hunter Dickinson is the offensive MVP. And then defensive MVP, I mean, do we just go with the rims? Do we go with the entire team for KU? Do we go with Shakeel Moore because what he has done with being in the starting lineup has been so pivotal for KU? When you look at Cincinnati on the offensive end of the court, like, who struggled the most? Well, Jizzle James only had 3 points. He was 1 for 6, so that would be credit for DeJuan Harris. Simas Lukosius had 2 points. He was 1 for 10 from the floor. He was 0 for 6 from 3-point range, and that was kind of a team effort, whoever had him at the time, for KU. So I think this just goes to a team award. Like, I don't think I can pick one individual. You held Cincinnati to 40 points on 31% from the floor. You also forced them into 12 turnovers where you led 16-6 in points off turnovers. They were 3 of 22 from 3. It's just a team effort. The whole team wins it for defensive MVP for KU. What's next for the Jayhawks? This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com. You can join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com. You can get in on the Denver Broncos plus 8.5 if you think they're going to play it close with the Bills, or if you think the Bills blow them out, then boom, you can do that. You can even put together a money line same game parlay. You want to go with the better seeded teams, the teams at home. You can parlay together the Bills money line with the Eagles money line with, let's say, the Vikings money line, and that pays off plus 187. Or come up with your own, bet on a future, bet on somebody to score a touchdown parlay, whatever you want to do. Just have fun with it and make sure you're doing it responsibly. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Finishing things up on today's show, what is next for KU, who has now all of a sudden won 3 straight games? They've won 2 straight on the road. They are now 12-3 on the season. They're now ranked 7th on KenPom, and now they have a top 5 defense on KenPom with the 6th best 2-point defense and effective field goal percentage nationally. They are going to be at Iowa State coming up on Wednesday. This is an Iowa State team that has been excellent so far this season. They just beat Texas Tech in overtime on the road. That's a really good win for them on Saturday. They're 4-0 to start in Big 12 play. If they win this game and they're sitting at 5-0 and they push Kansas at 3-2, they're going to feel like, hey, it's us in Houston for a 2-man race. Now, I don't think that would be the case because they still have to have a return trip to Kansas, but they would certainly feel good about where they're at. Whereas if you're Kansas, if you win this game at Iowa State, you're going to feel really good about where you're at for the Big 12 standings. Obviously, you would still have, an undefeated Houston, which I haven't seen how they've done so far today. But this is a big game. Titanic clash at the top of the Big 12. The only team who's beaten Iowa State was Auburn in the Maui Invitational, and Auburn's the number 1 team in the country. And that was a game that Iowa State was winning for a lot of it. Auburn had a big comeback and ended up winning by 2. So Iowa State is one of the best teams in the country, and you're playing them in Ames. This is a real good opportunity for Kansas to prove, the road woes are no more, and we've seen them prove it against like Duke and stuff that they can beat some of the other top teams in the country. But winning at Iowa State, I think that would feel like another level for KU. And then after that, they'll be back at home next Saturday against Kansas State, who hasn't been very good this season. But I guess rivalry game, you never throw the records out the window books. That's what people always say. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time with Locked On Jayhawks, as we'll be back at it on Monday talking a little KU football. They have a new punter, really good one. They have a new linebacker/safety, and we'll get into a little more KU basketball and preview that Iowa State game next week. So make sure to subscribe to the show. See you then with LOJ.